The next interview was made in Ardmore with H.F.V. Wilson in June 1973. Mr. Wilson was the first black elected to county office in Oklahoma.
Interview with H.F.V. Interview with H.F.V. Wilson, Carter County Superintendent of Schools, June 21st, 1973, at his office at the Carter County Courthouse. Interviewer, Robbie Pitts. Okay, now I've got it on there. First of all, we'd probably start with your family history first. Where were you born, Henry?
Seguin, Texas. It's down
Spell that.
Seguin.
Where is that?
30 miles east of San Antonio.
And just go ahead and keep talking. What did your parents do? I know they were educators also.
Yes, my father was the dean of Waterloo College at that time.
And how do you spell that?
Guadalupe. Waterloo. Spanish, Waterloo. And that was in Seguin. And he had come down, in fact, he was both my parents. My father came from Galesburg, Illinois, and my mother from Knoxville, which is 5 miles out of Galesburg. And they'd known each other before they went to Texas, and they met again there. And he was dean, and she was an instructor at the college there. I was born on the campus of Waterloo College.
You had a good start for your vocation in life, didn't you?
Yeah.
Were you the only child, or were there
No,
brothers and
I was
sisters?
the second of 5 boys. And we moved from there to Waco when I was about 9 years old. And my father was dean of Central Texas College. That school has since been closed, and we were reared on campus of that school. The finisher was reared.
Where did you go to school?
I attended the, you might say, high school work at the Central Texas College. The public school was up to about the 6th grade. Out in Waco, and then Central Texas College, and I graduated out of high school department. Then my college work was done at Fisk University in Nashville.
What was the name of that?
Fisk.
Fisk University. And what did you major in?
I majored in mathematics.
Oh. Did you think you were going into teaching at that time, or were you going into something
Really,
else?
I was really interested in electrical engineering, but of course the ones weren't available after I finished college, and so I worked at home. My father had a rug laundry to eat on. I say that because he was a Baptist denominational school, and they were always behind in his salary payments, and so he had to run rug laundry to take care of the family eating. And so I worked in that for a year after I finished college. Since we had a kind of ride and tie arrangement, since there were 5 boys of us, well, one of us was working the rug laundry while the others were in school. And so I worked that year after I finished college.
Did all of you boys finish college?
Yes. Five of us.
When did you come to Oklahoma?
Well, my father, since his influence was considerable in Texas, I was going to get out of his sphere of operation. And the peculiar thing about it, I just applied blindly to 5 different towns in Oklahoma. And the only reply I got was from Douglas High School, Ardmore. And then when I found out the man that wrote me was a former student of my father's and of my mother's. So I didn't
You
escape
didn't
his,
get
no, I didn't escape his influence at all.
Did you feel like you just had to get away from his influence to be a man of your own?
Yes, that was the more convenient. That is my opinion right there.
How old were you at that time?
Oh, I was 25.
How long have you been an educator?
Oh, for 6 years.
46 years. That makes you couldn't be.
I know you're going to start doing some adding.
Yeah, I just added it up. All right, how old are you, Henry?
That's about it.
Is that it?
That's about it, yes.
We always get around to what year were you born, and that always comes out real good. But you spent those 46 years in Ardmore?
No, I came here as a classroom teacher of mathematics, and I stayed until 1944. And then that's when I became principal. I went to Carver High School in Hominy, Oklahoma. Hominy, just like Hominy Grace, Oklahoma. That's up in Osage County, Osage Nation. And that's where I became a principal. I stayed there until 51. I came back here July the 1st, 1951. And I was principal of Ardmore Douglas until it phased out in 1969, July 30th, 1969. Then I became assistant superintendent in the Ardmore schools for 1969 and 1969-70. Then I retired. My second retirement really was in 60 and 70. And then I was called back to help out with the desegregation program in October 1970. Let me get it straight. Yes. I ran for, in 1970, I ran for county superintendent. I was elected, I think, August 25th, 1970. And then I was called back to the school in October 1970 to help out with what is called the ESAP program of desegregation.
ESAP?
Yes, it's an educational I'm going to put my tongue, but it's educational. I'll have to look it up. I'll take the stuff out of my desk, and I could instantly find it. I didn't clear my desk out on that.
Okay.
And I worked at that until the next year until school closed in 71, and I went into this office July the 5th, I think, or July the 4th, I believe.
You said that was your second retirement. Did you retire one time before
Yes,
that?
I actually retired when I left Douglas.
That was in 1970.
In 1969.
1969.
No, back up. The retirement was in 1970. Retirement was after school around 1970. And then I was called back to help the ESAP program. And I retired from that in 71, in 1971. And then I entered office because it's 6 months behind Mike McComber in this office on July, the first Monday in July. They're 6 months behind the others.
So this is your third retirement then,
Yes,
really?
third, yeah.
When you ran for office, how many others?
I won. I just had one for them.
Just who was that?
The superintendent-elect.
Rowe, what?
No, superintendent-elect John Spratley.
Yeah, John. You remember what the score was?
No, I don't.
I can't remember either. Now you're retiring again.
Yes. This is supposed to be it.
I got a feeling it's not. What are you planning to do?
No, I haven't had no plans. The schoolmasters gave me a combination fishing rod and reel, and I'm supposed to use that. And since then I've gotten some plugs as a birthday present from this office, and so I'm supposed to do a combination of that rod and reel and the fishing plugs. I'm supposed to.
Do you like to fish?
I used to when I was a boy, but wife gave me some tackle some time ago, and I never did with it. And so, but I made changes on this. I think I'd have to. I made that promise to the administrators, kind of administrators, that I mean, kind of schoolmasters gave me that I would do some fishing. So I'm gonna carry out that part of it.
You've lived through quite an era in education, haven't you?
Yes, it was pleasant, very pleasant. Part of it was the Depression, and schools never have gotten as much money as they should, and that was really a trying period. But all part of the game, because the rest of the country was in a combined also.
You went through integration. What do you feel about integration? Has it helped your people?
It's according to the particular locality. If there's an integration of general integration, well, it is the help of the integration of students and faculty and jobs and housing, things like that, where you do have a present situation. But if any one or two of those parts are missing, the general integration is just not ideal. That is one of the things that you find in the North that's been true. It's like my father came down to Texas because of scholarship. He finished Lombard College in Galesburg. He got a master's degree for that. And part of the scholarship requirement was that he give 2 years work in the South. And of course, there weren't opportunities to teach in the North at that time, even though he was one of the, he had entree as far as the college was there, but there weren't the openings in the North, and so he also dodged the weather. He used to fall through through ice in Illinois, but he got down to South Texas, and he never went back to the north except in the summertime. And so the opportunities were better for teachers in the South, for black teachers in the South.
As far as Ardmore is concerned, do you feel that integration has been total? As you said,
It has one of the difficulties is the faculty. It's been difficult to get enough black faculty members, and unless you do have black faculty members, two things happen. The white youngsters don't get used to them, and the black youngsters don't have someone to look up to and to anticipate and hope for the same status that teachers have. That's one thing I find in years ago looking at the North, because I had some cousins in the North, but most of them never finished high school. They all finished high school, but none of them went on to college, except a few exceptions, because the inspiration wasn't there. They didn't have any black teachers, and they had just didn't have the drive that you find in the South.
You feel then that, from what I gather, that the South has come a
Yes,
long way.
Yes.
Further than the
Yes, as far as inspiring black youngsters. In fact, I got my master's degree and I worked on it at the University of Iowa before the Depression came on, and I had stopped, and I completed it at the University of Michigan. And I found out that most of the students who were in either undergrad or grad school were black Southerners. That picture has changed now, but at that time most of them had the drive because they'd gotten that in the South, where there were black doctors and black school teachers, black businessmen, to kind of inspire them to higher heights. Whereas, except for the large cities, you just didn't find black operations. Like in Chicago, you find them, because they're not plenty, but black teachers, but that was more or less in a segregated situation. And, when you got out of the black ghetto, where you didn't find any black teachers, so just like in my father's town, there was no black teachers there. They just weren't expected, and so that was a long time ago. That was back in the 80s and 90s. So those were just some of the things that just weren't expected. Nobody expected it, and so they didn't aspire to it.
Well, you were here during the integration of the Ardmore City Schools.
Yes.
Can you recall, just for the record, some of the good things, some of the problems that we had during that time?
Well, Ardmore has been a peculiar town. In fact, of all the towns along Red River, it's had better relations, better human relations than any town, I would say, in this southern Oklahoma. And we had a good football team, and a number of our patrons were white. And there just hadn't been the conflict or the offness that you find in some other places. And it was smooth. I mean, you didn't have the confrontation that you had in other places such as Frederick and other places where they had confrontations.
What was that due to? Just me. What was it
The
primarily due
The
to?
General Temple of Ardmore, it's just frankly, it has a lot of shortcomings. There's still areas where black employment hasn't gotten in, as I said. Unless you have total immigration, you have difficulties. And unless you have economic immigration, where you have problems. But the local employment has increased, and of course, places like General Dynamics and Oil coming in, where you have economic, where you have less headaches, and you have economic integration. And beyond that, I might say is when I came to town, my mother came up from Texas, and she noted that the atmosphere in Ardmore was just better as far as race relations and concerned. She felt like going up down the street, just better. And so that background was here way before anything like this industrial growth was coming in was thought of. And it wasn't perfect because there were still taboo places, but Ardmore had drive-in here that no segregation before Oklahoma City and Southside. And so those are just some of the things that they were just black and white or more used to each other. They still had segregation in some of the theaters. The balcony was for blacks and the lower floor was for white. But Ardmore has had a first in several things, just like it had a first in the human relations and job placement, which was real outgrowth of city support, and which made for better jobs up and down the streets. You find blacks employed in a number of stores now. Some places they haven't broken into. But that's just a facet of the general Ardmore atmosphere. Ardmore did the same thing that Dallas did from a more economic. Dallas did it from the economic point of view. They integrated overnight. They integrated their eating establishment because Dallas is an establishment city. And so the power structure said we will have integration, and they had it overnight. Just as an economic, not so much as any love for races, but just economic. We're going to be a convention city. Well, we will have to have open accommodations, and so they got it overnight. But Ardmore did some of the same thing, only I think quicker. Was that the Chamber of Commerce just said we will open up eating establishments and hotels, and it was done quietly without any fanfare or marches or anything else. And so Ardmore has been fine, despite some of its shortcomings. It has been fine and hasn't had some headaches that some of these other towns have had. Though it's still going to have to continue to be alert, because unless just like the faculty ratios, unless faculty ratios keep up, well, the white child is not exposed to black teachers and not aware of black competency, and the black child has no inspiration because he doesn't have the faculty member there to, not necessarily to relate to, because that's impossible on big schools. You can't, black teacher can't look out for every black child, but the black child does see the black teaching operation and does know that there are black competencies. Now, those are some of the things that, as I said, some of the folks in the North weren't aware of black competencies. They just weren't aware that there were black doctors and black businessmen who see that in Birmingham and New Orleans and Miami and places like that.
You said you went back with this ESAP program. What were your duties in that job?
That was more or less a human relations, integrating of school activities as far as black and white children were concerned, and community activities, because we had an advisory board that was a cross-section of the town as far as races concerned, Indians, Chicanos, and blacks and whites. And that advisory board helped with the students. And of course at the school we had different heritage things, and to explain the peculiarities of particular races and their contributions to life and living. And so that was the purpose of the program, was to ease the aches and pains of desegregation. And I think that we were successful in doing that. Because we had several programs as far as general brotherhood is concerned, and then black heritage and Indian heritage. And there were a series of items in the paper, and as well as the school activities.
You had the support of the paper as well as...
How's that?
You had the support of the paper
yes.
as well as...
Everything we took down there. As far as black heritage, we ran a series of items on outstanding blacks, and the same thing, outstanding Indians. And it was well received. That's when we had General James here, Chapter James of the Air Force.
Wasn't he a magnificent speaker? He really was. But from what you say, it sounds like we have almost a model way of integration.
Yes, there's difficult really to get black teachers to come to a small town, but they are needed if integration is to be smooth.
That is that one of the major things we need now, is black faculty members?
Yes, black faculty members would ease both for the purpose of acquainting white children with the competences of black people, that they can be something else besides the domestics. And to give the black children examples that they can pattern their lives after. Because as I said, that's one of the difficulties about the fact of segregation was that they just didn't have examples.
Well, you certainly, your own life has been an example to the black student. Did you have any big problems?
No, and to give the black children examples that they can pattern their lives after. Because as I said, that's one of the difficulties about the fact of segregation was that they just didn't have examples.
Well, you certainly, your own life has been an example to the black student. Did you have any big problems?
No, I haven't had. I mean, I've had some, but I don't consider them problems. Because I was reared on school campus. In fact, my whole life has been spent in a school situation. And some of the things, just like I hear some teachers who are glad at the end of the day to get rid of the kids. I never had that difficulty.
Huh.
And I guess because my father was teaching, my mother was, my father enjoyed teaching, and I enjoyed teaching. In fact, that's one of the greatest things I miss when I became a principal, is losing the daily contact with students, and placed in the position of being an administrator and corrector after the fact, rather than a set of opinions before the fact. So I got the bad actors.
You feel, though, that you were needed in the administration?
Yes, I think I made a contribution in the administration. With the action that is in the classroom, that's what the action is. Of course, if the principal is adroit, he can still make an image beside being a beater. But it takes some doing, you know. Of course, you just don't have that daily contact with students.
So much has been said about welfare, Henry. Is it good for the people or is it bad for the people? What is your opinion on the federal and state assistance to not just blacks but to any people?
My opinion is that unless you really realize what poverty is, and unless you realize the numbing of inspirations and aspirations that comes from poverty, where you just don't appreciate the situation. The average middle class person, whether he's black or white, just doesn't appreciate the difficulties of getting off of the poverty side. He just doesn't appreciate it. I have the same thing that middle class whites who look down on welfare cases and believe everything they hear about the chiseling that goes on. The chiseling goes on, but they're not aware of the fact that a family makes maybe $1,200–1,500 a year in total, that they can't possibly live on that. And it is a demeaning experience unless there's something done to alleviate that, either in training or in interim assistance until they do get off of the schedule and get enough education to get a job. But they just don't appreciate that. That's one of the things that white teachers and middle class black teachers have difficulty relating to poor people. They just have that difficulty. I noticed that, and it's one of the things that blacks have to continue to guard against. Some don't, because as soon as they get to be middle class, if you're not careful, they start thinking middle class. Some people think that is racial, but it's not. It's more or less a thinking syndrome that you find on the basis of income. Now, a lot of folks are not aware of that, but you find that blacks and whites of the same income relate more to each other than whites of different income. They just unconsciously don't realize that. But a black who works in the office or the white of the same income has more common points of interest. And the poor white who doesn't know what you're talking about. He hasn't been off college and hasn't experienced some of the things. He just doesn't know what the middle class or upper class whites are talking about. And those are some of the things that teachers have to watch in teaching kids. Some of them are not aware. Some teachers just not aware that there is a difference in the section of town that a white child lives in and the type of parents that he has. And that he's lost. That's one of the reasons these folks, that they were running away from Ardmore way before segregation was ended. And they were running from the bigness of the school where they didn't get a chance to express themselves. And that's just the unconscious don't realize that. But there's a greater difference between socio-economic level and his racial level. You find that out in Washington where people live work in the same office. They have their tendency to after hours have relationships that they have because of the commonality of interest. It's just one. Unless you sit down and analyze, you don't realize it.
Never thought of it.
How's that?
I'd never thought of it really that way.
Yes, well that's it. Now of course, you're still going to have the race cleavage. You're still going to find the white who doesn't go out of his way to cultivate the acquaintanceship with the black. That you find the two whites, you're still going to find that cleavage. But in final analysis, a white worker has more in common with a black white collar than he has with a blue collar worker. So they'll get together on something like running from a black influence. They'll get together on that. But as far as talking the same language and things like that, well, you find that they have more in common. They don't realize it, never get a chance to realize it because they're afraid of each other. The blacks afraid of the whites, and don't trust them, and the whites afraid of the blacks. They have some things that stigmatism that has been attached to black people. So it is interesting to watch people. It's interesting to watch their friendships within the race. And of course you find the same suspicion. I know some black doctors are just as vehement against welfare children as any of the Nixon administration people have been. And you find that they have to be awful careful. As soon as they cross that middle class line, if they're not careful, well, they don't do the same thing as whites. They don't run to the get-go. And that's when the whites generally have to run because the wealthier blacks come out and buy where they are. They try to escape the get-go too. And it's something that it takes a lot of study on because you find that contempt for welfare is really economic. And unless you have lived with it and know just what poorness is and can keep that, well, that's that knowledge, you have a contempt for anybody that's on lower level than you.
Do you find, well, of course it is, and you would find that some people are hampered by welfare?
Yes, you find plenty of folks who are children. You find people who don't know how to use the money and all the commodities. They don't know how. And they won't know how until they are trained. Because it's really education. same thing is true of blacks as true of whites. If you're ignorant, you're just ignorant. And that is, if you don't know how to use your money and don't know how to space it over the period, well, you just have problems. And yet people are intolerant, just like I've heard a lot of quotes that are incorrect about the percentage of children. But a lot of our larger papers, I know I'm not going to quote any of them, but a lot of them don't get the facts straight, and that's part of the press. They say they're just like the George Richburg, I think that's his name, the court cases down in Dallas. They have come in for considerable play. But when you reduce the actual figures about the children and welfare, it's just not true. And welfare is based on ignorance and poorness, and not being able to buy well, not being able to watch a sale, not being able to know what the supermarkets are doing, and things like that. And so it's really a crippling thing, and until people get educated to what their possibilities are, they have difficulty.
Then education in itself is the answer, then, you think?
Education in books and education in attitudes. Whereas you can detect that just like in my father's home. There's just, in Illinois, there's just a different attitude. Of course, the world is becoming more or less even. But when he came down to Texas, it was different. We talk about work ethic. A different work ethic in Illinois among all races than there was in Texas. It was pretty good, but Texas more or less agriculture at that time. See, I watched that thing change. Dallas is just as much an art as any town you find. I've been to Atlanta. Atlanta is not a southern town. It's a northern town. And the temple is business. So now the boy coming up, San Antonio was more or less a manana place. They had much for whites as it was for Chicanos. Yeah, but the temple is changing. You find Houston and San Antonio, though it still has a resort atmosphere, and Dallas is you find the hustle there, and the temple there is just as much as it is in Chicago. It's just changed within my life. Because old Dallas never has been very slow, but I can remember Houston and San Antonio were slow places. That's no longer true though. Air conditioning and business is just changed. I went down to visit my son Sunday, and the little towns like Arlington, they would just drive a little from the road. And they just driving out for everything they can get.
While we're talking about your children, how many children?
I have one son.
One son, and what is his name?
And Henry H.F.V. Jr. and H.F.V. Wilson Jr.
Junior. And your name is a little peculiar with 3 initials. How did you manage that?
Well, those are all gotten from grandparents. And so
That's Henry Franklin Vincent. Thought I had that right.
one grandfather named Benjamin Franklin, and the other one was named Henry Vincent. And so Franklin was slipped in between the Henry Vincent. Henry Franklin Vincent.
It's kind of odd to have 3 initials.
Yes.
Rarely ever see it. You've belong to quite a few organizations in town. Can you think of all of them offhand? Just a minute, let me... Talking about the organizations that you belong to.
Well, there is I'm on the executive committee and the board of directors of the Southern Oklahoma Development. That's SODA. And on the advisory committee of the Southeast Army. On the board of directors of the United Front of Ardmore. And I'm on the board of directors of the Kiwanis Club of Ardmore. And I'm treasurer of the Eastside Community Center Association. And I'm chairman of the board of directors of the Human Relations and Job Placement Services. That ought to be enough.
What church do you go to?
The First Baptist Church. I'm also on the alcoholic division of the alcoholic board of the mental health department, state mental health department.
Let's see, let me see if I've got that right. Alcoholic Board of State Mental Health Department.
Advisory Council
Of the Alcoholic.
Of the Alcoholics Division of the Oklahoma Department of Mental Health. That's the state. And the same
And you're on the advisory board.
Yeah. Same thing on 5 County.
And you're on the 5 county here.
Yes.
Alcoholic. What is that called?
Alcoholism Division, I think is the name. Everything I've shifted out of here. It's the Alcoholism Advisory Council, Department of Mental Health.
Now that's the 5 county thing.
Yeah, these are 5 county, those state, on the state too.
Okay. Anything else?
Let's see. No, that's not all, but I think that's about enough. I'm on the 5 county executive committee of the 5 county community action program.
How do you make all of these meetings?
Well, I sometimes meet myself coming back.
Just for the record, though, if you can think of any more, we could put it on the recording, because it will be worthwhile to keep, just for your own benefit.
Well, I had put them down for Charlie Dallas the other day, but I forget. I started writing down the meeting and found out I wasn't getting them all, so I wrote them down afterwards, but I didn't make any copy of it. Let's see. I don't remember. Okay, I'll remember later on. Then it's getting bad. I can't remember.
I'll check with Charles, that he's got the list of them. Oh, he's talked an awful lot about everything that I've asked about and all the things that I'm curious about. Just talk about things you'd like to talk about. What are some of your
Well, those, as long as it's education of children, I'm interested in that. And my main concern is that getting teachers who have an awareness of students' problems. Getting black teachers who even are aware of students' problems. Because you can find black teachers who are intolerant of some of the difficulties that black kids have, who can make them intolerant of some of the poor whites. And to get middle class whites to relate to the problems of poor whites and minorities. It's really a problem. Some of them don't realize that they have a problem in relating to, they think that they say they're fair, and I treat all kids just like, but they don't. And if you're a country club connection, you have a better chance of succeeding in school than if you don't have. And that shouldn't be, but that's the problem. And the bigger the school gets, well, the more problems there are for the student who is not, as you might say, just naturally, when you want to use the term pushy, but motivated, just motivated. In other words, a better chance of finding a student in the student council whose father is runs his own business or is an executive in the bank. It's just goes hand in hand. And ordinary who's who in the schools is going to be just like who's who in the town. And children actually don't come that way. They have varying abilities. And if the teacher's not as adroit at drawing it out, well, it never gets drawn out. And he's lost because of that. In other words, teaching is hard, and some folks not aware of it, not aware that it's a hard job. I mean, they're wearing a hard job because it's like had a young man come in to eat land, session was over. He was glad to put the kids all on the parents. But that's all right to a certain degree, but unless you like to teach, you shouldn't be in it. Because one of the kicks I get out of it is going over and remembering things that kids have said. Just like I had a boy to ask me, you come to this conclusion, and I always regret it because I can't remember who said it. If it was in mathematics, and he asked me, Miss Wilson, there's a formula for everything. And when he said that's the real key of mathematics. There's a formula for everything, including the atomic formula that Einstein wrote down before anybody had conception of what it meant. So there's a formula for everything. But I've always regretted that I lost track of what boy said. Well, generally, you can follow these things. The youngster comes up with something like that, has something on the ball.
And you feel there is a formula for pulling these people, poor white people and poor black people up.
Yeah.
And that's where
you work at it. You got to work at it. So you got to appreciate that people are not necessarily, they don't necessarily have to keep the same status all their lives. But unless they are careful, well, one of the most intolerant persons is a self-made person. I found that out. He's very intolerant. And if he made it, well, welfare is no good. I'm not going to say it, but I had a form, but I can't mention it because they're supposed to identify it. But it is difficult to get scholarships out of self-made. It's difficult to get it. And they made it. They're not willing to contribute so much to help others.
It's sort of the old adage that I walk 10 miles to school.
Yes.
That children now should walk 10 miles to school. Is that right?
Yes.
It's not the same thing we hear so often. It's a cliche, but it's so true.
Yes, it's the most intolerant people are self-made people. They are intolerant. And it's because they make it. They don't realize that there's so many things that throw people off. I've noticed that. There's so many different things success and failure. It's just such a narrow gap. I had plenty of kids who dropped out in the 10th grade. I knew were college material. Dropped out because they didn't have any push at home. So on. And I know plenty who came to school, seeing a father, the school he taught, they weren't in a high school in Texas thing. And they would come there, maybe 15, anywhere from 15, 20 years of age, entering the 6th grade. And they managed to go on through and finish high school department, if they didn't go to the college department. And they went on and made contributions. That's one of the things that people forget exactly. And the parents pushed them off the farm because they were either slavery background or had been at education at all, but they pushed them off the farm because and then they got inspiration to go on. Many of the doctors came out of that situation.
Let's go back to our own local level here. What do you think about the closing of Washington as a black community?
I was disappointed in that, frankly, because of the fact that you use, it's the same thing that has been the backbone of, in fact, without talking about the president, he used that to a great advantage, and that's a neighborhood concept. And that is what is called the Illinois system of schools. And that is this district school. Everybody could identify with it. And that is the backbone of the all the talk about busing is the neighborhood school. And this particular section, the northeast section, is the only one being penalized in not having a neighborhood school.
We're talking about the quality of teachers and what they can do.
Well, it's just a matter of when I start teaching, in fact, Oklahoma is ahead of other states catching up, but Oklahoma's been ahead of as far as teacher preparation for years. They have had very few non-bachelor teachers, and but as far as subject matter is concerned, well, there hasn't been too much laxness in that. But some teachers haven't really learned human relations. They haven't learned human relations, and they come up with confrontations in the classroom that shouldn't happen. And which means that the personality clashes that shouldn't exist if the person knew about the background of the student. He took the time to learn the background of the student. I know those are some of the things that white teachers found about black students. Some of the language that they use. They came up in a family that they just used. Most of the persons at home, well, the child has a tendency to curse. And sometimes the curse words will come out. And the teacher didn't know the parent. See, I didn't have that difficulty because I generally knew at least all my seniors by name. And I knew most of the other kids because I was concerned with their families, and they would talk to parents. And I would have a key to exactly why that boy does something. But unless the teacher sits down and studies his class and kind of gets back and makes some home visitations to find out where that child comes from, well, he just doesn't appreciate some of the peculiarities that the child has. And of course, it's hard. Arnold used to have a rule that you have to visit each home that you taught. But that's a chore. That's a chore because sometimes the parents don't want to see you. If the home is not presentable, they don't want to see you at all. And so you're really intruding when you come to visit them. But on the other hand, some effort should be made by each teacher to learn something about the child he teaches. And he doesn't have to go to a home visitation, but he ought to try to find out something about that child's background, economic and other things. I know those are some things that schools, just like we used to furnish, of course, Ardmore is, maybe I not have to do that now, because Ardmore's economic status is high, so we still have a lot of poor folks. But the fact that to be a member of the cheerleaders, get by in uniform. Now that's going to work a hardship on some children, but I had a teacher, I just had to veto it. She had plans for each child get a blazer for $30. I found out about it, I hate to see it, and just stopped it. Because I knew the same thing used to be in class range. I set the amounts, back in the 4 days of Ardmore, I set the amount, the maximum amount that a range could be purchased. And because I found out that the poorer you were, the better range you wanted. And sometimes I had to send it back so we couldn't pay for it. And so those are some of the things that teachers and administrators just have to look at the total picture. If we have this activity, just how many children will be precluded from it because they economically unable to participate in it. The ideal answer would be for the school to furnish everything. That's impossible. And so a happy medium will have to be struck where the things that are done are achievable by students without stigmas attached. Now the government was on a way to do that, but the cost was prohibitive, and such as meals, to have free meals for everybody. Or whether you're putting a statement on particular students. But those are some of the things that as soon as you start putting people in little cubby holes, and setting them into patterns, you often destroy a child for life. And some of them automatically kept off of some of these clubs and things like that, when the cost is prohibitive. But it's maybe sort of utopian, but a public school is a public school, and it can be run for all the children, all the people. Well, you have a pretty good program. As soon as you start to delineating between race and between economic status, between social status, you are going to leave the world on. But it takes a whole lot of planning, and school people don't have the time or the information to plan activities that are not prohibitive in cost to the average child.
Well, what are you really going to do when you retire, Henry? Are you
Well,
going to keep up with all your civic activities?
Yes, I take off on some of them, because some of them cost money. So I'm going to have to take off on some of them, just like this alcoholic thing in Oklahoma City. Most of them is on there or either have expense accounts or independently wealthy. And of course, they can come to the meeting without any difficulty. And I paid out of my own pocket, so that makes a whole lot of difference. And I won't be able to do that under retirement. And so those are some of the things that I find myself kind of working kind of thin, and perhaps taking into consideration some of the
You'll probably still keep a finger in education.
Yeah.
What year were you born, Henry?
Oh, you did the necessary addition. Don't get candid like these ladies. All these ladies have changed. It's like this office. This office locates census records. Often these schools don't have it. And so we perform the service here of bringing people to life. And so we have to research the census records to find out exactly what their birth dates are. And their Social Security and Medicare has brought a lot of ladies out the woods. And they started talking as soon as she gets 60 years old. They started looking for 62. And nothing later than 65. I remember that used to be a dark secret. But they tell it now.
Are you 71?
You can put that down, yes, ma'am.
Oh, come on now.
You're good at figures.
I can't add and subtract.
Yes, that's good as anything. That's right.
If you are older than that and look as young as you do, I would be proud to tell me how old you were. Now, if you followed that one, you've got it made.
Well, we are just, I'm not one to, I'm not an mathematician, and I'm not one to not give points to one who's done a good job of adding.
Well, I'm afraid I did a good job there, and you're too happy with it.
I'll give you an A for adding.
You're much too happy with that number, so I'm sure it probably is wrong.
That's good to see.
I tell you what, write a story or give anything like this, you give the date of birth, and then you think that people aren't going to bother with adding and subtracting. See? And I really need it on the tape, whether I use it in this or not.
Well, that's good as any.
Oh, when is your birthday?
June the 7th.
You just had a birthday.
Yeah, that's when I got the clothes for my rod and reel lesson, schoolmaster kid.
June 7th, 1901.
Well, you figured 1902 there.
I'm going to ask Sue. She'll tell me. So I'm figuring up how many years you were in education.
46.
No, 46 years. And you were 25 when you started teaching. That's where I came out with mine, but you must be. I tell you what, I'm going to say 1900. If you are younger than that, you'll kill me.
No, you can use 1902. You're fine.
Okay.
Yes,
Come out on this, and 50 years from now, when your ancestors are listening to that tape, and they won't know how old you were.
That's a good figure. That's a good year. I think who is Mr. He was returning to the singing wars. Mr. Talk about these years. And Frank Sinatra, yeah. That was a good year, 1902.
That was a good year.
Yes,
Okay. You just had a birthday, probably 1901.
Your mathematics is good.
I'll ask Sue, she'll tell me. I sure appreciate your
Well, all right, it's been my
being
pleasure.
saved
My
with me.
pleasure. Any questions? Hopefully, I don't think I'll say anything to get me run out of time.
No, I think they're very profound, and I really appreciate you taking the time with me.
Well, the pleasure's all mine.